One day, Pinky received a letter from her sister Marble. Marble wrote in the letter that she is coming over for a visit to see her and Maud. She hadn't even seen her sisters in quite some time, and she missed to see them as much as she had even seen them in a long time though. And when Pinky received the letter, she was super excited because she hasn't seen her sister since the last heartwarming Eve. And when she told Maud about this, she was even happy to see her sister as well. And though Maud was first had been asked to greet Marble at the train station, but then as the day came, it turned out Maud couldn't do that. She was occupied at her home by taking care of some cleaning, so Pinky had to do so. But she didn't mind that. And when she greeted Marble at the train station, she was super excited. She was hugging her sister-in-law over and over, and they even went to Sugar Cube Corner to have something to eat. There, they both small talked about things that happened over the past last year. Marble mentioned that she has been still working with her family like limestone at the rock farm, but she was still very happy to be in Ponyville for the very first time. She has never been there yet. The only places that she wanted to see were the Ponyville after what Pinky or Maud had mentioned in the letters to her. Even though this was the very first time in the Ponyville, she was very eager to know more about Pinky's friends, even though that she had met some of them, like Applejack and Applebloom. But she was very eager to know more about some of her other friends, like Twilight, Rarity. But Pinky did mention that some of her friends might be a little bit too excited and maybe a little bit eager to know more about herself, even though that Marble usually is more quiet, shy type of personality. But later that same afternoon, when Pinky brought with Marble to the castle to see Twilight and some of the other friends who was there, they were really happy to know her sister a little bit more, since they had been knowing Marble, Maud, and Limestone. And of course, they were always happy to know more about Pinky's other sister, Marble. They had a good time. Pinky had introduced them some new cupcakes that she had made recently, and even, of course, Twilight made some tea for them. Even at the first, Marble didn't speak much. She rarely spoke at all. But after that, the others had opened up a little more about themselves and telling so much about their old adventures with Pinky and how Pinky has been a very positive impact on the entire community. She is the one who actually brings parties to celebrate birthdays, even uh, basically any party for any different events or reason. Even though that Pinky was very happy that Marble had decided to be visited in Ponyville, because she knows that Marble normally would not have been doing so herself. But it turned out Maud had been talking or basically been pen pal with Marble for some time and been asking her and even had invited herself over to visit in Ponyville. Since Marble never had been to such a big place before on different occasions. But even though this was very first time in Ponyville, she was very convinced by her parents to let her go to see her sisters. Even though the limestone was first, turned out that she was not much against that idea. But even though that she was only going to stay in Ponyville for about a week, for to see her spend some time with her sisters. And of course Limestone was not much against that idea. After all, she knows that she hasn't seen her sisters personally in some time. So she agreed to let that happen. But even though after that Pinky and Marble left the castle later on, there was something about that Marble attached her mind to. She was really happy to see someone Pinky's friends, but it was one out of her friends that she was really curious to know more about. And that was in fact Spike. She has only heard about dragons living in Dragonlands, but she never seen a real dragon herself. But knowing that Spike was still much very a baby dragon, or maybe as an early teenagers or like 10 or 12 years old, he was very kind, very generous, but that was in fact due to the fact he was raised by Twilight and her family. But as they were walking through town, they saw another creature in town, and that was another dragon. And Marble was scared for no reason when she saw that this dragon, a red dragon. It was taller than herself, and even Pinky was. But Pinky saw and smiled and said that that's Garble, a friend of Spike, who was living in Dragonlands, who had recently just been in town for a visit of his friend. But when Marble did notice Garble, after first look, she was terrified. But after the second look at him, she felt calm for some reason. She even thought him quite handsome, even for being a dragon in his early 20s. Still, she never expected to find a dragon like him handsome, but she did say that to her sister Pinky. But that same evening, as Marble was laying on her guest bed, she she was still thinking about Garble. For some reason, she couldn't even getting him out of her mind. There was something about him that made her blushing, feeling warm inside. But she didn't even had no idea what this could mean. So she had decided maybe to ask Pinky or maybe one of her friends what this could mean. But she didn't know exactly who to ask though. Because if she remembers right herself, if she asked Pinky, she probably think that she had fallen in love with some pony and she would make a party to celebrate. So she decided not to ask Pinky. But there was one pony that she might be want to ask though. There was either Twilight or Spike, some pony who knows Garble a bit more better than the other ones. So she decided maybe to ask one of them tomorrow. But the next day, Pinky was occupied at the sugar corner by baking some other cupcakes and cakes and anything. So Marble decided to look around in town by herself, which Pinky didn't mind though. But after that she had walked around maybe for a half hour, she was still thinking about who to ask, Twilight or Spike. But after considering who would be the best to ask, she decided to ask Spike. After all, he is a dragon, and he is knowing Garble even a long time. And he might have some insight if she probably has a crush on Garble, or if that she just like him that and even just thinks that he's quite handsome. That's all. So she looked around in town first because as she knows, Spike's helps a lot around in town and wanted to know where she could find him. And it turned out he was at the castle with Twilight. But when she went there, she asked Twilight if she could speak to Spike from the other for a moment. And Spike said, "Sure, I can talk to you." So they went to his room where they could have some more privacy. And there, Marble did ask Spike about this. And even though the Spike was not much as same age as Garble, but he still had this maybe some idea what this could mean. And Spike brought what he considered to be a crush. But he didn't know if that she would probably ask Garble herself. Because there was only recently when Garble had come out to his friends and family back home that he was very sensitive, that he was making poems and even other type of music like that. And that was surprising to Marble because this was new information. But she even asked Spike if she should tell Garble about this. Or at least maybe ask him what if he would consider date a pony. Spike was very hesitated at first to even give an answer, but he said maybe perhaps asking him about this, maybe. But he couldn't even give her a straight answer what he would say, because he couldn't even know himself. So she thanked him for his advice, and she decided to look around in town if she could find him, because she didn't see him on most normal places. But when she did found him outside town near a small lake, he was actually in the water, just floating by himself. He was enjoying the relaxing in the water. When she tried to speak with him, she was quite shy and almost immediately almost became silent. When Garble did notice her when she was about to leave, she stopped and slowly turned around and smiled at him because he asked her if she wanted something, and she just nodded, and he asked her for her name at least for it to be proper to be introduced. She only said Marble, but was very much as a silent whisper, and he couldn't even hear her first. So he asked her again, but this time she spoke more clearly. She said that she is Marble. She is a sister to Pink Pie and Mud Pie, and that if he knew about them, well, he said yes, he did know about them. And then they both sat down under a tree. At first, it was silent, but he asked her what was she was if there in the first place, and if she wanted something. She was just curious to know more about him and more about dragons because she never seen any other dragon except him and Spike. And then she brought up the topic about dating other creatures. She never heard the stories of if dragons would date other creatures like a pony or a griffin. And of course, Garble mentioned that he would probably date a pony if there was any pony was interested in dating him. Even though that hasn't been any as often though. But she said she by a small laugh she would date Garble. But when she did say that, Garble didn't laugh at all. He was just looking at her with a curious look and asked if she was serious about it or it was just some sort of joke or something. But she didn't laugh or even say that it was a joke. She said she would probably do so, but he then said maybe that they could go on a date, maybe this at the same evening, to see if it could work in between them, despite that they even know anything about each other, and that they had just recently met for the first time. But Garble was willing to give all of this a try, at least. And even though Marble was very hesitant at first, but she luckily agreed to go out with him on a date. So they decided to go to have dinner. But there was one problem. The restaurant wasn't big enough to be contained Garble's size. So they decided to have a picnic instead, at the same place where they were now. They agreed to meet on the same place around 3 p.m. And since it was early noon, so they had some time to get used to it. Marble went back into town, and when she came back to Sugarcane Corner, Pinky asked her where she had been over some time. Even though the Marble just said that she is just walking around in town, she spent some time with Spy talking to him, and spent some time with Garble just talking to him, get to know his own. She wanted to know more about the dragons. Pinky, she didn't say much, she just continued to bake when Marble didn't mention she was going on a date with Garble. That shocked Pinky because she dropped the cupcake dough on the floor and looked at Marble with big eyes. and smiled and started jumping up and down of joy. She said she was really happy. That is, this was unexpected. She said that she wanted to be for a party to celebrate, but Marble said no. She didn't want to have any sort of big celebration, not at least yet, because this was, even though this was Marble's very first date ever, she didn't want to be ruining it the moment, because she didn't want to know, she didn't want to spoil Pinky's idea for a party to celebrate, because she had no idea if this dating with Garble would even last, or if there was any spark between them, even though they both had agreed to go on one date, because they didn't know if there was any sort of future between them. And Pinky agreed to do so, but she agreed to have a party to celebrate if this possible relationship between Garble and Marble would work. And after that same afternoon, Pinky had also made a promise not to reveal this information to any of her friends or any point, because she wanted to be for sure this relationship might work between Garble. Garble was at the park, at the spot where they met first time. He had them brought with him some basket with some sandwiches and even some gemstones for himself. They were actually having a great time. At first, they didn't speak much because they didn't know what to talk about. But after some time, they actually started laughing about some of his jokes that Garble made, and she even listened to some of his poems that he made, and some of that he recently just came up with. She was very interested to learn more about himself. Even after the first date, though, Garble went back in town with Marble, and they were just laughing and talking about some things. Even though that Rarity and Applejack and even Pinky saw them just talking and laughing, both Applejack and Rarity asked why were her sister with Garble? But she said that they were just spending time to get to know each other as being friends. They didn't know about this date though because she made a Pinky promise. Unfortunately, as the week passed, Marble was going back to the rock farm, even though she wanted to spend more time with Garble. But she has spent a lot of time with him from time to time during the whole week. Even though despite that, Garble very much liked her company and they had grown more and more attached to each other, and even though that her family and her friends was still very much unaware about this dating. And the only pony who knew about it was Pinky. She decided to tell her family when she got back home, because it was the only first time they would know about this. Because when Marble came back home to the rock farm, her parents and her sister Limestone was just curious to know how things went for her back in Ponyville. She said that she had a great time with her sisters and even get to know her friends and even made a new friend. But this new friend turned out to be her boyfriend. That did surprise her parents, but they even asked his name, and she said Garble. They asked what kind of pony he is, but when she mentioned that, was asked, she'd said he wasn't a pony. Both her parents was looked at each other and then asked if he was a pony, what a creature was he then? But she was just blushing and said a dragon. That surprised her family, but they were really supportive to her. Even Limestone was very much a little bit upset at first, but knowing how much happy Marble were with Garble, because every time she spoke about him, she could see how happy she were, the sparkles in her eyes, how smiling she were when it happened. Every single time when she mentioned about Garble and her, how much time she spent with him, it made her so happy. And even though Limestone's really curious to know more about this Garble, she had encouraged Marble to invite Garble to the rock farm so they could meet him for the very first time. even though that Marble was a little bit curious if Garble would do so. But she agreed to send a letter to him and to ask if he wanted to be coming over to visit her family at the rock farm. But he did mention in his next letter that he was very scared how her family were at least taken when to meet him for the very first time. Even though they were supportive to her relationship with him, but he was scared how they would react the first time. But he did agree to be there for the next few days. And when he did arrive, both her parents was really still supported to know more about him. And when they did learn about that he was making poems, and he even performed some of his poems to her family, and they all listened. It was very listenable. They actually enjoyed it. Even his staying at the rock farm was not what he was used to, but her family was very happy to know more about Garble. And their relationship, though, it only grew stronger. When Garble's sister, Smolder, was informed about his girlfriend, Marble, and especially when that Marble is in fact a younger sister to her teacher, Pinkie Pie. It was a little bit awkward for her, knowing that her teacher's sister was dating her older brother. But slowly with time, she would get used to it. And she doesn't even love to spend time with Marvel when they visited Dragonlance or even when she came back to Ponyville. But there were about some time later on when Marble had decided to move. She had decided to move to Pinkie Pie's home in Ponyville. But unluckily though, she couldn't stay at the Sugar Corner for a long time. She only stayed there for only a short time before she found her own home in Ponyville. And Garble, he was still very much in love with Marble. Even though their relationship was very happy that they spent a lot of time together when he came back to Ponyville to spend time with her. They went on a lot of picnics, dinners, and even went to the movies. They had a great time. But then it came for one day when Garble had a big announcement to Marble. He was moving from Dragonlance to Ponyville to be with her. She was really surprised, and that he had even found a big place for him to live. He had, by the help of Twilight and Pink and the others, managed to build a home that was suitable for him, just a bit a distance outside of Ponyville, and it was a great place for him. He had even invited Marble to move in with him, even though that they had only been dating for less than a year. But she agreed. Even though some of her friends, especially Pinkie, was excited about this, but Rarity said maybe it was too early because they didn't even know if they would work between them. But she was proven wrong for all aspects. They actually had a great time living together. And after nearly 5 years of being dating, Garble took with Marble to the same place where they first met those 5 years ago and proposed to her, which she said yes immediately. She was really excited because she had no idea that this was going to happen. But when they told her friends and family, they were all overjoyed, especially Pinkie. She was super excited. She was jumping up and down, and threw a big party to celebrate all of this. Even though after nearly about 5 years, it was about the time then the Pinkie sister was settling down with some pony. Even it was a dragon, said Pinkie said. But they were still very happy to see Marvel to be settled down with some pony, even it was a dragon. On the wedding day, though, they all had a great time. Both her parents welcomed Garble into the family, and even that Garble was very curious to know more about living and even being married with a pony. But he loved it all a lot. They even went to Las Pegasus for a whole week for the honeymoon. And when they came back home, they had now started a new life together, and Marble was very happy. But just only a year later, Marble mentioned something to Garble that he was going to be a father. That shocked him. He literally fainted after she mentioned this. But when he came back to awaken, he was crying of joy. He had always wanted to be a father to especially his own family one day. And now he was going to be a father, but they didn't know if it was going to be a daughter or a son, or if it's going to be a dragon or a pony, or a half a pony, a dragon hybrid. So when they went to doctors, they turned out to be having a dragon pony hybrid daughter, and they had the perfect name for her daughter. And only a few months later, the daughter was born. They named the daughter Burning Granite. Burning Granite was like her own father, strong, fast, but even a good flyer at a young age. Even though that she even loved to help around her mom at the store when she worked with Sweetie Drops. But Burning Granite even loved to spend time with her aunt Pinky at Sugar Corner. She loved to bake with her aunt. They baked a lot of things together, cakes, cupcakes, anything. Even though that she had even found her own purpose in life. Even though she loved to bake for her aunt, even loved to fly around with her aunt, her dad, and even loved to help around at Sweetie Drop's candy store. She could even decide, even after she had her cutie mark, she could even decide from which life or from which life thing she wanted to do in her life. Even though she loved to bake for aunt, and even make candy with her mom and Sweet Drops. There was something about those two things she wanted to do. She wanted to do both, but it would be a bit some sort of conflict. Until after one night's of dream, it came to her. Baking. Baking was the true purpose she always wanted to do. So, she started working with her aunt at Sugar Corner with the Cake Twins after that Mr. and Mrs. Cake had retired. And it was the right call because after she started working there, she made a lot of stuff, a lot of things that she had never expected to do. She was very talented at baking. That was the fact that she had a lot of training and teaching from her aunt Pinky. But she loved to bake. And from that moment, she knew that baking was the true purpose for her. And she loved it every single day. Even after she had been working there for 2 years, one day she even fell in love with a stallion from Ponyville. Then they even got married after they'd been dating for about 6 years. And they even had two daughters and one son together. She loved to spend time with her family. And for Grand Garble, he was very happy to have met Marble at the very first time those years ago at the spot near the lake. If he had never met her for the very first time, they would never have found a true love and never had this beautiful family together. Even if Marble hadn't even written to her sister coming and said, mentioning that she's coming over for a visit, if she hadn't done that, She never had met Garble, and she would never have found her true love, and even mentioned or experienced this new love with her, with Garble, and even get married to him. She realized it was meant for her to go to Ponyville, even if she had no idea herself though. But for Garble and Marble, this was a true love meant to be. Marble was very happy that she was even meeting Garble for the very first time, and that she accepted his invitation for this picnic date with him. If she didn't, she would never have experienced this love and even this new unique relationship with Garble for all others. She was just really happy to have meeting him and got the chance to know more about him as they were dating and to be married with the one that she loved the most of all. Even Garble was very lucky to have found Marble for the very first time when they met those years ago. Not only to be in love with her, married with the one he loved the most, but experience this true love with any creature, despite if she was only a pony. He loved her deeply, and that's how Garble and Marble Pie found a true love, got a family together. The end.